Okay, hello and welcome everyone. So this video is a solution walkthrough for the final exam, cumulative final exam for Principles of Microeconomics. What I'm going to do is I will kind of page through the exam, hopefully not too slowly, but slow enough where, if you hadn't previously taken the exam, you can see the questions, so you know what's on the exam right away. Have the opportunity to stop the video or take screen grabs to be able to complete it yourself. You know what? As I'm doing this, I'm realizing probably what I should do is I won't do it for this video because I hadn't thought of it till literally right now. But what I ought to do is I should put these on my Substack, and then if you want to take the exam, you just go there and do the exam, and then you come back, and at the end of whatever is that page, I will link whatever the solution walkthrough. Oh, sorry. So this one is a game matrix. I have this set up here, like typeset a little bit better. So, oh shoot. Here I thought I was being so slick, and then I didn't like that it was at the bottom there, so I moved it up and then I showed the answer. But you still have to work the problem to see why the answer is what the answer is. All right, so there's 54 questions, which means we're almost through, but not entirely through. So sorry about that. Now I'm regretting not just starting over and doing the Substack thing that I mentioned, but whatever. Yeah. So there I've got a version of the microeconomics text that I'm compiling, and then I've got a version of my intermediate micro text, and kind of based on the slides that I've got from the video. And I'm starting a game theory one as well. And I think probably for this term I'll add a math for econ one, but I'm not sure where I'll put that. Anyway, so that's not what you're here for. Here you want to see the solution. So let me go over each of these. Right. So first question: successful advertising affects a company's demand by blank. Demand for the company's product and making demand for the product more. This is increasing demand for the company's product and then making demand more inelastic. The idea with advertising is hopefully it affects your firm's demand curve, which is the portion of the market demand curve that your firm is serving. And the idea is you definitely want to increase demand in the sense of you want more customers and you want their willingness to pay to be maximized, to be increased. But also you want to make demand more inelastic in the sense of through your advertising, maybe convincing consumers that there's fewer legitimate alternatives. All right, so two objectives a company owner tries to achieve through price discrimination are to sell to every customer whose marginal benefit exceeds marginal cost and charge each person the highest possible price. I mean, definitely you want to charge the highest possible price, but the most important thing is maximizing gains from trade, which means you want to sell all the way out to the point where price equals marginal cost. That matches what a competitive market would produce. You don't want to produce beyond where marginal revenue is smaller than marginal cost, because then there's no gains for trade. This can sometimes be an issue if you're facing an example where there's a demand curve. Sometimes students with first-degree price discrimination or perfect price discrimination wrongly conclude that the firm's going to sell everywhere along the demand curve, all the way down to the axis, which isn't right. You want to stop where price equals marginal cost and not sell beyond that point. You want to basically sell the market-efficient quantity with price discrimination, or as close as possible to it. If a monopolist engages in perfect price discrimination, yep, it produces the efficient quantity of output. Basically, just as I was saying. Okay. Shampoo aisle at the large store sells personal care products that contain many versions produced by a small number of companies. This indicates that shampoo producers this is brand proliferation to deter new entrants. You might have thought product differentiation, which is certainly part of what's happening here, but it's product differentiation for the purpose of brand proliferation. We have few firms, and they've got this kind of wide array of products, basically eliminating the space where entrants would be able to come in. And so that's the best answer there. Why is Nash equilibrium called an equilibrium? Well, it is an equilibrium. It's stable. The idea is we define Nash equilibria as the outcome. It's a strategy profile, actually, where everybody is mutually best responding. And if you're playing a best response, you can't gain by deviating. So since there's no profitable unilateral deviation, no one benefits by switching alone, we assume that it's going to be pretty stable. All right, so you and your friend are invited to pack a picnic and bring either potato salad or fruit salad. You realize if you bring the same type, you'll be disappointed by not having the other kind available. This is an anti-coordination game. Remember, we defined an anti-coordination game. This is following the Stevenson and Wolfers definition, where players are using a different but complementary strategy. Okay, so if a monopolist produces a quantity and generates marginal revenue greater than marginal cost, you can increase profit by producing more output. You want to produce all the way out to the single price monopoly's maximizing point is where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Sorry about my mouse clicking. I tried to move it on the other side of the microphone. I tried to do different things with it, and this is just what I'm going to have to do. I'll have to get one of those, I don't know what I'll have to do. I'll have to get a different mouse. Anyway, so suppose Louise is the only person licensed to rent out tandem bicycles on the boardwalk in her small hometown. When she increases her rentals from 15 tandem to 16, market price declines from 35 to 34. What's the marginal revenue of the 16th? Well, marginal revenue is the change in total revenue when you produce one more unit. So good, we're producing one more unit. We have to calculate total revenue. It's going to initially be 525, then it rises to 544, which is a difference of 19. If a seller can create switching costs for its product, then it's difficult or costly for consumers to switch to another seller. That's basically the definition of switching costs. That's kind of the idea. What happens to average fixed costs as output rises? Well, as you produce more output, average fixed cost goes down to zero. Fixed costs are constant. Fixed costs would hold constant or hold steady, but average fixed cost is the fixed cost divided by output. It tends towards zero as quantity gets really big. This is responsible for the left portion of the downward sloping U shape that makes up the average total cost curve. The other side of the U is made up by increasing average variable cost. In the market for wedding flowers, firms are taking economic losses. In the long run, firms will leave the industry. Industry output will fall. Economic losses will decrease. The idea is as firms leave, the displaced customers are then served by the remaining firms who are going to see an increase in their firm demand curve, an increase in price, but overall output's fallen. Basically, it's allowed them to get closer to what would be like the monopoly or like the cartel price or something. Okay, so Delta Airlines price discriminates by charging lower prices to vacation travelers than business travelers. We'd say probably vacation travelers are more price sensitive, so their demand is more sensitive. The travelers are demanders, not suppliers, and it's going to be their demand is more sensitive to price changes. The idea is you give the discount to whatever is the more elastic group, the side with the smaller willingness to pay also, and you charge a price premium with price discrimination to the firm or to the side of the market with more inelastic demand or with higher willingness to pay. Main reason a monopoly engages in price discrimination is to increase profits. That's kind of the whole point. Some of these other things might also happen, although probably not barrier to entry. But the point of price discrimination is to increase profits. Producer surplus increases when we go from single price monopoly to perfect price discrimination. The idea is the single price monopolist is producing a smaller quantity than the competitive market would. And remember, it's actually the smaller quantity that's going to introduce the deadweight loss because there's foregone potential gains from trade. Right, with the monopoly, there's two problems. One problem is the price is higher than with competitive pricing. But the second problem, and the one that's important for efficiency, is we get underproduction. So if we go closer to price discrimination, perfect price discrimination will produce something closer to the market, competitive market outcome. And so there goes the deadweight loss, there goes consumer surplus, probably. And as a result, we'll see an increase in producer surplus. Then the next question was what happens to consumer surplus? As I said, consumer surplus is going to decrease when we go from single price monopoly to perfect price discrimination. How does output for a seller with market power compare to output for a seller who does not have market power, assuming they both follow the rational rule? Rational rule is going to tell us to keep producing up to the point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And so the firm with market power is actually going to reach that point a lot sooner than the firm without market power. Market power, we're thinking about monopoly. No market power, we're thinking about something like competitive market. According to the five forces framework, a seller's existing competitors determine the type and intensity. This is basically from the slide. It's basically a definition of that component of five forces framework. Entry by firms into an industry results in a left shift of the individual firm's demand curve. Remember, the idea is like the entry by the rival is going to reduce the share of customers served by an individual firm. They're losing customers to rivals. So as a result, there's a decrease in their demand, right? Change in the number of buyers is a demand shifter. In this case, it'd be a decrease in demand. When lobbyists for producers in a market influence government regulations. The regulations often make it more difficult for new producers to enter. This is why we called regulations as one of our entry deterrent strategies, one of our barriers to entry. We also had supply side strategies, demand side strategies, regulatory strategies, and then we said is like price war or like entry deterrent strategies. But regulations are a barrier to entry. It's one of our ways that firms are going to potentially try to shield their profits into the future. Market for wedding prices. Market for wedding planning services in a city is initially in long run equilibrium. There's an increase in market demand. We expect in the long run, new firms are going to enter the market, right? So if there's a long run equilibrium, but then there's an increase in demand, we expect there's going to be an increase in price. There's going to be an increase in profits for firms in the industry, which will entice new firms to enter. In the long run, the number of sellers and the level of profit are both affected heavily by strength of barriers to entry. Right? So in the long run, we expect profits are going to tend to zero, actually for all firms, even for a monopoly. And the only thing that's standing in the way if it's monopoly profits going to zero are barriers to entry. Learning by doing can result in unique cost advantages. So these are specific to the firm, though. So I gave several examples in class, but the idea is it's going to be specific actually to the firm and to that particular team of workers generally. It's going to have those learning by doing gains. You've received a bachelor's degree in biology and charting 2 possible life courses. In one, you could attend medical school for 4 years, take out a $300,000 loan, in which you'd pay $175,000 in interest as you repay it. As a doctor, you'd earn $150,000 per year, lifetime earnings of $6 million. In the other scenario, work as a high school science teacher, earning $2 million lifetime earnings. What's the implicit opportunity cost of becoming a high school teacher? So we're interested in implicit opportunity cost. So it's going to be your foregone earnings, so the difference between what you would earn, the $4 million difference between that you give up being a science teacher instead of a doctor, and the interest on the loan, right? Because we're interested in implicit opportunity cost. Okay, so as a company manager, what do you need to know about your customers before you can successfully price discriminate? Well, you have to have market power, you have to have the ability to prevent resale, and then you need information about consumer reservation prices. If you have a lot of information, if you know their individual reservation prices, now you can perfectly price discriminate. If you know something about the reservation prices correlated with their group membership, maybe you do something like third-degree price discrimination or group pricing. If you don't have any of that information at all, except that you know that consumers differ in a way that's relevant for their willingness to pay, then you do something like the hurdle method or second-degree price discrimination, and you try to have those consumers self-select into the menu of prices that you offer for them, and in that way they actually reveal the information that you would need. But here, what do you need for price discrimination? Among these, the best is you need the reservation price. Casey inherited $100,000 from her grandmother. Rather than invest in a mutual fund that earns 5% per year, quit her job as translator for the UN, which paid $60,000 per year, and started Casey's Coffee Crush, a small cafe. The location rented cost $20K, the equipment cost another $60K, advertising cost $40K. In the first year, the revenue was $150K. Accounting profit, this is just revenues minus explicit costs, so it's going to be $30,000. Use the table. So here's the table for Nash equilibria. We're looking for best responses. If Martin selects a price of 35, Bella's best response is going to be, I can't highlight because I used a picture because I had to fix the fact that this wasn't typeset. Okay, so if Martin selects a price of 35, we're restricting our attention to the left column. This is like hypothetically, what would Bella hypothetically want to do? Bella's best response is to set a price of 40. Okay, what if Martin set a price of 50? What's Bella's best response? Oh, it's still to set a price of 40 because profits of 6,000 are better than profits of 5,000. All right, so like that gives us Bella's best response. Using the check mark method, I put a check here and I put check there, or underline method, I'd underline Bella's profits across both of the entries on the top row. Okay, so what about Martin's best response? If Bella selects a price of 40, now Martin's looking at the top row and choosing the left or right column. Martin can get profits of 3,500 or 1,000. Oh, we'd rather have profits of 3,500. So put a check mark here, or I'd underline Martin's profits here. Martin's going to best respond to Bella's choice of 40 with Martin's own choice of 35. What if Bella set a price of 55? Martin best responds then with a price, still 35, because profits of 550 is better than profits of just 5. All right, so the Nash equilibria, the place where they're both best responding. So this is not the Nash equilibria, to clarify. These are the profits in Nash equilibria. The Nash equilibria is Bella sets a price of 40, Martin sets a price of 35. Nash equilibria is defined over strategies, not over payoffs. But these are the Nash equilibria payoffs. Monopolistic competition is a market with many sellers producing different versions of the same product. True by definition. That's just definition of monopolistic competition, which is basically perfect competition, but with product differentiation. A company's opportunity cost determines its next best alternative. Company's opportunity cost determines its bargaining power. More bargaining power is held when its next best alternative is better than its rivals. Right? So opportunity cost or the next best alternative is the key to bargaining power. Las Vegas locals habitually present their driver's license when buying goods and services because they get discounts. Why would they do this? Well, reservation prices of tourists are higher than those of locals, so there's a higher price for tourists, a lower price for locals. Right? This is an example of group pricing or third-degree price discrimination. Which statement is true? A firm with economic profits will also have accounting profits. Economic profits minus opportunity cost is accounting profits. So if you have economic profits, that means that economic profits are bigger than opportunity costs, which means it's certainly positive, which means accounting profits are certainly positive. So you'd have accounting profits. Cost-benefit principle says the full set of costs and benefits should be evaluated when making any choice. That's one of our core principles, actually the first core principle of economics. State of New York allocates additional spending on after-school programs. Then the opportunity cost of the expenditure is, well, not zero. It's not the dollar amount of the additional spending. It's not relevant only if taxes are raised. It is the value of the alternative expenditure foregone. It's what you give up, right? Opportunity cost is what you get to lose. It's what's foregone. You've had a good night selling peanuts at the basketball game, but you still have some bags left over. The game's almost over. You decide to drop the price from $1 per bag to 50 cents per bag. This is based on your knowledge of law demand. At a lower price, you'll get a larger quantity demanded, and you need to increase your quantity demanded because you want to get rid of the peanuts and not have to, I guess you'd eat them yourself or, whatever. Okay. You run into an electronics store that sells, among other things, big screen televisions. As the price decreases, the quantity supplied decreases. This is an application of law of supply. It's not the supply change, It's not the quantity supplied increases. If the price falls, quantity supplied decreases. Direct relationship between price and quantity supplied. Inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. If the price for bison meat is in equilibrium, the price will probably not change in the near future. That's kind of definition of equilibrium. Expect it to be stable. For normal goods, an increase in income, that's a demand shifter. Increase in income will lead to an increase in demand for a normal good, decrease in demand for an inferior good. And so as a result of this increase in demand, we get a higher equilibrium price, higher equilibrium quantity. Shifts in supply always cause quantity and price to move in opposite directions. The reason why is we're shifting that supply curve against the demand curve. And along the demand curve, we're getting a change in price and then a change in quantity, and those are moving in opposite directions, is the idea. You can see that just by drawing the picture. What happens to the equilibrium price and quantity when demand increases and simultaneously supply decreases, but the demand shift is smaller than the supply shift? Well, the increase in demand is going to give us a tendency to see the price and quantity rise. The decrease in supply is going to give us a tendency to see the price increase and quantity decrease. So we definitely know the price is going to rise. So we know we're looking at A, B, or C. Quantity could rise or fall except for, because here it's going to rise and here it's going to fall, except for we're told the demand curve is smaller. So we know the outcome's actually going to look just like the supply shift. So we're going to get, a decrease in quantity. All right, so it's A. If the price of the good increases by 10%, quantity changes by 15%. Price elasticity is going to be minus 15 divided by 10 equals 1.5 in absolute value. Right, so price increased by 10, quantity is going to decrease by 15, although you didn't need to track the negative sign here because we're interpreting these just in absolute value anyway. If the increase in the price of coconut oil brings an increase in total revenue, demand is elastic. Demand is inelastic. If we get an increase in the price and a higher revenue, it means the quantity must have fallen small, or the change in price was larger than the change in quantity. Let's say that correctly. If we get an increase in, just read it. If we get an increase in the price of coconut oil, we get an increase in the total revenue. The percent rise in price is larger in magnitude than the percent decline in quantity demanded. So revenue rises with price increases if demand is inelastic, and falls with price increases if demand is elastic. And the reason why is price and quantity are exerting kind of different forces on quantity or on total revenue in opposite directions. So what you need, though, is for revenue to overall be rising, the price increase has to swamp the quantity decrease. Okay, so a tax imposed on new SUVs and collected from consumers would cause the demand curve to shift leftward by an amount of the tax. Right? So this is a tax on buyers. We'll model this with a left shift to demand. I don't like that I said demand will shift downward. I should have said demand will shift leftward, but none of these are going to work because this is a tax imposed and collected from consumers. So the statutory burden is on consumers. So we're not talking about supply, and we're not going to get an increase in quantity supplied. Get a decrease. In general, rent control set a rental price below equilibrium price. Therefore, the quantity of rent-controlled apartments is going to exceed the quantity supplied. So the issue is we've got a below equilibrium price, which is going to cause a shortage. QD is going to be bigger than QS. Suppose the equilibrium price of wheat is $4.55 per bushel. If the government sets a price floor at $4.85, that's an above equilibrium price, so we're going to get a surplus. QS will be bigger than QD. You can have an absolute advantage in producing a product if you can produce that product using the fewest inputs. It's just our definition of absolute advantage. All right, so here's an application of comparative advantage. We have two characters learning to play a song or do a tax return. This is the hours it takes them to do it. F spends 9 hours on a tax return, which is half of the time required to play a song. It takes 18 hours, but this is half the time. 9 hours is half of 18, so half the time necessary to play a song. So effectively, doing a tax return costs half a song. However, for the other character, 8 hours is 80% of the time necessary to play a song. So rather than losing half a song when we do a tax return, our other character loses 80% of a song. So F has the lowest opportunity cost, gives up fewer learning new songs when completes a tax return. A tariff is a tax on imported products. True by definition. In the importing country, the most likely effect of the tariff is going to be to raise the price and decrease quantity demanded. It'll move the price closer to the no-trade equilibrium price. Quantity demanded is going to fall. Quantity supplied domestically is going to rise. Marginal private cost is the cost paid by the seller in producing one additional unit of output. Right? So this is just definition of marginal private cost. We add to marginal private cost the marginal external cost, and then we get the marginal social cost. Suppose we had a negative externality example. How is the marginal social benefit curve positioned on a graph where there's positive externalities? So it's going to be above the demand curve. The demand curve is going to be the marginal private cost, and then the marginal external, the demand curve is going to be the marginal private benefit, and then the marginal external benefit is going to be the externality. Those summed up give us the marginal social benefit. We draw the positive externality, the additional social benefit is almost like a rightward shifted demand curve, though that's not exactly what it is. Same thing with taxes. It's not literally a leftward shifted demand or supply curve with taxes, but we can model it as if it is. I mean, graphically it is. It's just like conceptually it's not quite what's happening. All right, when someone can enjoy the benefits of a good without bearing the cost, the good is non-excludable. That's what invites free riders. So subject to free rider problem. Sellers may choose not to sell a high-quality item when buyers can't tell the quality in advance, and so buyers are unwilling to pay the price of a high-quality product. That was the lemons problem. This was adverse selection of sellers. This is the issue like in the used car market, for instance, that we discussed. Low utility. So I'm thinking about the other exam. Okay. More low-quality goods are a large share of market where the buyers cannot observe quality. That's adverse selection of sellers. So adverse selection of sellers is where the preponderance of goods in the market are low quality. It's a market failure because the sellers of good quality items are not participating because the buyers aren't going to be willing to pay a high enough price. Adverse selection leads to a market that's inefficient. It's a market failure, which means there's gains from trade that don't take part. In the case of adverse selection of sellers, it's the sellers of good cars or good products that are unable to find buyers, even though if the buyers could verify the quality, they'd be happy to pay a price higher than what the sellers are demanding. It's just that they're not. Moral hazard becomes a greater problem to the insurer when consumers can take actions not observable by the insurer. So sometimes we just define moral hazard as a problem of hidden action, or think of it as a hidden action problem. There's two ways that we talked about moral hazard. One was as just this incentive conflict, like a principal agent mismatch between one party acting on behalf of the other. But it's fundamentally an issue of hidden action. And so in the case where you're not perfectly able to observe or monitor the actions that, in this case, the customer is taking, there's possibility for moral hazard, basically. It becomes a greater problem. Moral hazard itself is like opportunistic behavior or the buyer failing to take adequate precautions or something like that, shirking in the labor market, or so on and so forth. These are all a bigger issue when the actions are unobservable or not monitored. Okay, so I hope you did well on this exam. And I'll go ahead and conclude here, and I'll see you in the next video.